today we're going to be making a little pleated dress. Now the one that I'm going to be making, it's kind of a combination of the views. I'm going to actually be making this bottom, which is like lower on the sides and shorter in the middle, kind of different. And I'm going to be using the sleeves from this shorter version. So I think it's going to be cute. It looks pretty simple actually. It looks like it's just some long panels and then pleating in the front and the back and some sleeves. So we should be able to get this done pretty quickly. I am using, again, it's 100% cotton, and it is like a very light canvas, and I find this over like near home deck type of fabrics. So if you're ever looking over there, make sure it's 100% cotton, not the 100% polyester, because that stuff stays really stiff and uncomfortable. This stuff washes up super soft and super comfy, and the thing is, it's thick enough that you can wear it without worrying about anything showing through. But since it's 100% cotton and really soft, it's great for everyday dresses. So I'm going to get started cutting this one out. So the first thing I'm doing before I even get started putting my pattern piece on, because this is a sturdy woven, is to make sure my edges and my straight of grain is right. So I went ahead and tore a strip off the side so that I can line those up exactly, and that way I'm confident that everything's going to hang right. Because if you cut it out and everything is skewed in your threads and your fabric, it's just not going to hang right. So especially something like this where it's a lot of long panels, if the threads are a little bit cockeyed, the whole thing could like pucker. I just wanted to point out, if you're new to laying out patterns, when it looks like this, where it looks like the sleeve is on the fold, they don't want you to cut it out on the fold. They're just showing you that it'll take up that much space because the front and back of the sleeve are shaped different. So what you need to do is take the fabric that after you have cut this part out, there'll be a chunk of fabric left. Take that fabric, open it up, and cut out the sleeve. Now, this is actually a fairly loose-fitting dress, but one change I'm making right now is I cut out a size 16 in the dress. But on this armband, so the sleeve is gathered around the arm and it has a gathered armband, I'm actually cutting that piece out in a size 20 because I want to make sure that I have plenty of room around my arm, just because I want this to be super comfy. And since it's going to be gathered on there, there's really no other difficulty than just cutting it out slightly longer. So just to let you know, that is an option if you want. All right, so the first piece that we're going to work on is the front, and it's got some dots up here for sleeve placement. There's a center dot here that we need to mark, and that is going to be a point that they want you to do stay stitching up to. And it's important to note that they only have a 3/8 inch seam allowance on this neckline. Everything else, it's not indicated what it is, except for maybe the hem. So right now, this one is 3/8 inch. Everything else looks like it's 5/8 for seam allowances. But I punch out with my little tool. I punch out my holes. And the way that I mark for these is I punched out the top and bottom of each of these little tuck lines, right? And then I can come back in and draw in the dots right there so that when I move my pattern, I can see these dots. Now, either you can just try to wing it that way, or you can draw lines. I typically overmark everything, so I am actually going to come back and connect those lines. Since my pen is heat erasable, as soon as I go to iron my fabric, all of this is going to disappear. Get it all marked, but then the first thing I'm going to do is put my stay tape on here before I have a chance to manhandle it. After that, I'm going to come and serge all the way around the edges. What I'm going to do is just start at the very top, and I press it with my little steam iron, coming down just past the V. Clip that. And then start up the other side. And just work it like that and press it down. And this is going to make it, because it's woven, it's going to make it so that this cannot stretch. Alright, so I have all of my edges serged and the stay tape is in place. So right now I'm going to pin all of my tucks, they're called. So the way I do it is there's 3 pairs, 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to stick a pin in the first bottom dot of one of the sets and then back up through the bottom dot of the other one. Alright, and then before I actually tuck that into place, I'm going to do the same thing with the top dots. Push that all the way through. And now I can see exactly where that fold is going to be. So kind of push the fold in and tuck these pins in so that they are going to hold it where it needs to be. And it's as simple as that. And then go on to the next one. So you're going to do that for all 3. Actually, because I'm doing several at a time, I'm going to put my pins sideways this way. That way I can fit them all in. Okay, so now that I have them all pinned, I'll take it to my sewing machine and just one at a time fold the pleat over and stitch between those 2 dots along the line, and then go to the next one. Just like that, over and over and over until I get them all done. Okay, so the first thing I want to do up here is I need to clip my center front to that dot. And since I have my stay tape reinforcing it, it's nice and secure. Now we need to press these tucks. And the way they want you to press them is so that they are flat and the seam is going right down the middle. All right? So you can kind of feel it with your finger when it's at the right spot. And I am really only ironing where the stitching is. I'm trying not to go too much above and below it, because at this point I'm not sure exactly how that's going to be falling. So I'll just stretch those out. But one at a time, flatten out these tucks and pressing it right where I've sewn. Okay, so the next piece I'm going to deal with is the side front. Again, I need to clip all my notches, and there's a couple dots here we need to mark. Those are where the pockets are going to be going. So once I get all that marked, I'm going to serge around both pieces. There's 2 individual pieces, and then we'll be attaching that to the front. Alright, so now this is my side piece, and I have it serged around, and so I'm going to be pinning it to the front that I already have pleated up, and matching your notches, and just making sure everything's going to lay nice and flat. Go ahead and pin it, and we're going to sew straight down 5/8 and then press the seams open. Alright, so if you're following along on the directions, what you'll see is next they want you to start working on the back, involving stay stitching the neck, making pleats, sewing it, putting on pockets, connecting the side seams even before you put in a zipper. I think that is making it a lot more difficult than it needs to be. So let me tell you the steps I'm going to take. I have my center back piece, and I am going to go ahead and do this part. I'm going to actually use my stay tape around the neckline instead of stay stitching, and I'm going to serge around the whole thing. I'll be making my marks for my pleats, but I'm not actually going to be making my pleats yet, because while I just have my center back piece all by itself, that's when I'm going to be putting in my zipper. There's just a whole lot less to move around, and it makes it a lot easier at the machine. Now, one other change is that the pattern calls for a separating zipper. I do not own a separating zipper of the right color and the right length right now, and I believe in using what you have. So I have a just standard old school zipper. I'm going to be putting it in using this method. It's a lapped zipper, so it'll still be hidden by a little lap on the side. And this is really easy to do, so I'll show you how how I put in the zipper this way. But first, what I'm going to do is, like everything else, transfer over all of my markings. I've got some sleeve placement dot, a lot of notches, and then these tuck lines. So I'm going to transfer those markings all over. Put my stay tape around here. If you don't have stay tape, stay stitch it, and serge around it, and then we'll be right back. So I have my two back pieces serged, just laying next to each other here. And when I serge around the pieces, I try not to cut really anything off the edges, just some stray hairs. But I don't serge the neckline because we're going to be binding that. And since I have the stay tape on there, it's safe. Now, something I need to mention is the type of zipper placement I'm going to be doing. It actually should be done with a bigger seam allowance than 5/8. You can do it on 5/8, and actually my little sample here is 5/8. I just wanted to try it and see. And yeah, you have enough fabric, but barely. What I feel a lot comfortable with is about 7/8, a little under an inch in seam allowance. So that's what I'm going to be doing on this back seam only. I've looked at the pattern pieces and at the amount of ease that there is in all of these pieces, and I don't think that there should be any problem with me taking a bigger seam allowance in the back. If anything, when I am sewing my side seams together, I can take a slightly smaller one there if I feel like it's too tight. But at this point, that's what I'm going to be doing. So there is a notch back here. Like here's the pleats and here's a notch. And they want you to start your zipper base below that notch. Okay? I would not put here's your stop. Don't put it above that notch. Make sure it's below that. Okay? So this is how long they want you to put your zipper in. That seems like an extremely long zipper to me. But you know, we're going to do what we do. So if it looks like your zipper is a little bit short, just measure the length that they have and measure your back and see where it falls. And as long as it is a decent amount below your waist so that you can pull that fullness over, you're going to be okay. But for this one, it looks like our zipper is going to fit, and so we're going to go along with it. Now, I like to keep a good chunk of my zipper sticking up above, because that makes it easier when I'm sewing it on. I don't have to work around this bulk right here. I don't have to let my seams get wonky. So I like to pull it so that if it doesn't matter if it's a little bit above or way above, you can always trim it off. But make sure that there's enough extra that you can put your zipper pull above the fabric. Now, here's another thing. All right, so I'm only sewing from this point. I'll be reinforcing it and sewing from this point down. I am actually not sewing this point up, but I will be folding this open and pressing it flat as if I did. If you are more comfortable doing a basting seam up here, flattening it out and then pulling that basting seam out, you can do that. I'm comfortable enough that I can just kind of eyeball it and press it. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so these are my pieces. It is sewn together from this point down. Okay, from this point up, I folded them in about an inch and pressed it on both sides. So if you can tell from the sample here, there's one side, this side is set in underneath the flap, and this flap edge is going down the center back. It's lining up with this crease. So the first step is to set this edge of the zipper in. And the way I do that is I come back up here. It's been pressed to a crease right here. Right here, if you can see. I'm scooching it out about 1/4 inch. So if you're looking at it, you can see here's a crease, and then I pulled the seam allowance out about another 1/4 inch, and I'm just making, just pinning it kind of in place like that all the way down. So what you're left with on this side is a a folded edge that's a lot smaller than the other side because you've moved it out, okay? And that is going to make enough room so that your zipper can sit underneath. Now the way that I attach these is I don't use pins if I can help it. If there's no other option, I will use pins, but I prefer tape. And this is a water-soluble basting tape, and it's got sticky on one side, paper on the other, and when you wash it, all the adhesive disappears. So we're working on this side of the zipper right now. And I am going to be running a row of this tape right alongside that zipper all the way up. And once I have it all pressed down, then I'll come back and I'll peel that paper strip up. Okay, so I have it all down. So now I'm just going to peel off the paper. And this is sticky right there. So now, knowing that the stop needs to be below where my stitching is, okay? So I'm going to set that. Let's see if I can do this here. So here is where it's sewn. This side I'm just folding back and getting out of the way, all right? From this point, I'm setting that above the metal stop at the end, probably about at least 3/8 of an inch above it. And then I'm lining up my new fold, the one that I just did with all the pins. I'm lining up that fold right up against the base of the coil of the zipper teeth. Once I have that placed, I can pull my pins out. They don't actually need to be there anymore. So I can keep pulling my my pins out as I go, setting it against the edge of that zipper. Okay, now you can see I have my zipper pull and everything above my fabric. That's what I want. I don't want my zipper pull or these ends stuck below it. So now what I'm going to do is come back. I have a very narrow foot, and I'm just going to run a row of stitching right alongside here. See, this can still go up and down. Oops, hang on. With it close by, it can still go up and down easily. Right? So I'm going to be running a row of stitching right along this edge that's going to be holding this part down. Okay, so I have it sewn straight down here. So before you go any further, test it out. Make sure it zips and unzips, and it does. So with my stop way up here again, the next thing I'm going to do is run another row of my double-sided basting tape down this edge, and again I'm going to be placing the tape. See this line? There's usually a line in a zipper that they want you to use as your stitching line. I'm going to make sure my basting tape covers that line and place it along here, and I'll show you before I pull off the paper. Okay, I've pulled the paper off, so this is sticky now. And what we're going to want to do is make this edge, this folded edge, in line with our seam down here. And you can see the seam is, well, you can faintly see our original pressed crease. That's what this should be lining up with. All right, so I'm just going to kind of press it down a little bit lightly in case I need to adjust it later, but it's a good guide just to press it up to that same crease to make it look nice and smooth. And I think that's pretty well in line, because let's see here, where does it start? If you can't tell where it starts, that's a good sign. So my stitching actually ends here, and then I just have it laid down here. All right, so once I'm happy with it, I'm actually going to press it down harder, like that. Here, I'm just going to put one pin at the very top, way over here, holding down that far edge, just to make sure it wants to stay in place, because it's a long zipper. I'm going to start sewing down here, where it begins, like on the inside here. Might be easier to see. We don't want to stitch below the metal stop. We want to be above that. Okay, so this is where actually we started stitching, all right? And that is above the metal stop. So I'm going to come over so I can feel that I'm going over that zipper coil. And then I'm going to pivot and come up. And I'll be coming up here at between 1/2 inch and 5/8, and that should put me sewing right about where the intended sewing edge seam is. If it's not right 100% on that line, that's okay. That's just a guide. It's not, you know, a rule of law or whatever. But that's what we're looking for. And just continue that all the way up so that when we get up here, we can just come straight up and in. And that's one of the reasons we want this up here, so we don't have to do one of those funky working around your zipper stop. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sew that. Now, I actually do not have what you would consider a zipper foot, which is just the little one prong that you put a needle on one side or another. I have one very narrow foot that the whole foot is probably 1/4 inch wide, and it has a little slit in the middle, so it's like 1/8 on each side. I just use that, and that way I can use it on either side. But if you have a zipper foot, you know, use the appropriate side and just work it the best that you can so that that coil of the zipper isn't going to be pushing your foot one way or the other. Okay, so I have done my stitching. Probably can't see it very well, but there is a line of stitching up here. So on the inside, what we have is one side of it, the edge of your fabric is just about right alongside the edge of the zipper. Okay, on the other side, it's going to stick out more because they're just different processes on each side. Okay, but the moment of truth is looking at it. Do we see a lot of big puckers or anything? No, it looks pretty decent to me, so I'm happy with that. Now, depending on which way you want the flap to go, just reverse the process. If you want the flap to open on this side, well, just flip it and do the short one on this side and the flap on here. You know, it's the same idea, but you can reverse the process. And so now I can open up my zipper all the way. It's 100% stitched on with just those 2 stitches and a couple strips of tape. And that's done. And to me, it's a whole lot easier to handle this part and do the zipper with just this one piece than to have it sewn onto the entire dress and be manhandling it. So now I'm going to go on and make these pleats. Actually, I might have erased some of those lines with my iron. I think I erased one with my iron. So I need to redraw that one line, and I'll fold up these pleats and stitch them exactly like we did on the front. And then after they're stitched, press them flat so they're centering over the seam. Now we have the back piece, the center back done. Here's my pleats. They're all pressed open in the zipper. Set that aside for a second. And grabbing the side back piece, there are notches to clip, and there are the pocket placement dots to also punch and mark. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and once again serge around each piece individually. All right, so what I have here is my side piece, and I've serged around it, and I'm pinning it to my back piece. And when I'm pinning it, up here at the very top, you know, between the notches, and they are princess notches, so there's going to be a little bit of fitting there. I have a little bit extra in the back, and I don't know if I've just stretched it out a little bit as I go and everything, but just to let you know, when that happens, when I'm sewing it, I put the side that's has a little extra on the bottom and put the shorter side on top. And that way, as I sew, if I put a little extra pressure here, the feed dogs will ease that in, and you won't have any issues to worry about. As it is, it's not very much, but just in case you have extra, because we did kind of cut it at an angle, that could happen. All right, so I have my back side seams put together, and what I'm going to do now is sew the shoulder seams together. And once I have this done, I can put it up on my dress form and pin the sides together and gauge if I need to adjust that side seam. And if I do, I want to do that before I put the pockets in, because they're placed into the side also. Okay, so this is just a quick look at what we've got here. These little, I'm not sure if I like that little poochiness right there, but that's just part of the tuck, I guess. I just have it pinned on the sides because I still need to come back and put the pockets in, the side pockets. But you get an idea. These darts are actually sitting pretty high, and looking at the picture on the pattern envelope, that's how it's supposed to be. But it is high. These are not at waist level. They're like an empire level here. And looking at the back darts are placed much lower. So the back ones seem to be placed at the natural waistline or thereabouts, so that looks really nice. And you can see that the zipper is blending in pretty well. I did not spend time matching patterns on here. I just did not feel like it. If you're working with a big pattern and you want to match a pattern, I have some other videos that show in depth how to do that. There is a linen dress I did with a blue and white pattern. In one of my very first ones, it was a DIY dress basically, and it says Beauty for Ashes. It has a whole lot of how to match patterns and designs if you're ever interested in that. But mine today, this is more like an everyday dress, so I didn't worry about it. So I think it's going to work out. You can't see in this shot, but the bottom hem, it is kind of it's asymmetrical. Well, not asymmetrical. It's higher in the middle and lower on the side. So that's kind of interesting. But it's going to work, so I'm going to go ahead, take it off the dress form, and get started putting the pockets in. So these pockets are actually fairly small. It's enough to throw something small in, but not a lot. But, you know, you can't win them all. There are 4 of them. And I am going to go ahead and, before I mark them, I'm going to serge around each piece. Once I get that done, I'm going to press them and come back and mark these 2 circles and the notch. All right, so we've got the pockets serged all the way around, and I've marked the 2 dots, placement dots that are on the pattern piece. Now on each side, on the fronts and the backs, you should have 2 dots. That's what we're going to be matching these up to. And because I'm looking at it from this side, I'm just going to kind of stick a couple straight pins so I can see it easier. So these 2 pins are where my dots are. So I'm going to take my piece and match it up so my dots are at the same location. And same process for all 4 pockets and all 4 sides. The right sides are together, and you're going to stitch this at a 3/8 inch. So the dot itself is set at 5/8. You're going to stitch at 3/8, which is in more. Okay, so go ahead and pin all 4. So all 4 of them at 3/8 all the way across. Don't stop at the dots, just go all the way across at 3/8, and then flip the pocket out and press it open. And when you do that, you're going to press it so that the seam allowance is towards the pocket. Okay, it's not going to be folded, it's going to be straight out towards the pocket. All right, so I have the pockets sewn on and I have them pressed out, so the seam allowance is pressing into the pocket, and I need to understitch these, which means on the pocket side of this seam, I need to come in here about 1/8 of an inch in and sew a straight stitch all the way across, and that's going to hold the pocket down nice and flat. So I'm going to do that on all 4 pockets right now. Okay, so I have the understitching done. If you can see, there's a very faint row of stitching on the top here. That's what it is, and that's what it looks like from the back. Right there, that's what it looks like from the back. So now we're going to be sandwiching the front and the back together. Well, not sandwiching, layering, pinning together, and working out the pocket placement. So the side seams, I tested them out on my dress form, and it's going to fit fine. When you're sewing these, you're going to want to start up here at the top. On both sides, start at the top and come down. Now, you can't really see the dot on this side, but I'm going to draw it in. It's 5/8 down and over. So from here, when you're sewing straight down, you come to the dot, okay, make a pivot point and turn and come in here and sew all the way around. The other dot we need to make sure is on the dress side of all of this stitching. So when you're coming up here, you're going to go past all that stitching for the pocket to the dot, turn, and start heading down at 5/8. All of this is at 5/8. This part was 3/8. This all is 5/8. And that's so that you can make sure that you're on the dress side of all of this stuff. You want to make sure that if you're not, then you're going to have a bulky pocket that's ugly. So make sure you come all the way past that stuff and then head down all the way. And we're going to do that on both sides. Okay, so at this point we are pressing the, hang on, let me unzip this for a bit. Give me more room. All right, pressing the side seam allowances open. Now, when you get to the pocket, look at where your front is, all right? This is my front over here, and we want the pocket to lay towards the front. So just under all of your little pocket stitching, you're going to clip almost to that seam allowance. Not all the way, but almost. I mean, almost to the stitching, and then so that you can press the seam allowance open. Okay, and then the same thing above it. We want the pocket to go forward, so we're going to clip the side back piece. I clip to like within an 1/8 inch of the stitching. That's usually enough that I can press it open, but I'm not worried about my cut going all the way to the stitching. So that way my pocket's going the right way. My seam allowances are open, and then I can put one final hardcore press right here so that, let me flip it in right side out now. This is my front and this is my back, and you can see my pocket, hang on. This is my pocket right here, just a sweet little pocket, just enough to put a couple things in, but you know, not a lot. It's going to lay nice and flat. All that stitching is hidden because of the difference in the seam allowances that we used, and it's laying really well. So I'm going to go ahead and press the other side the same way. Okay, so this is how it's looking so far. I think it's pretty neat. You can see the bottom. It looks like the hem is very uneven, and that's because it's purposeful. But I've got the side seams on and the pockets, and so right now I need to finish off the neckline. Now they want you to use bias tape for that, and I want to show you a couple things. Okay, so this pattern is calling for using single fold bias tape to go around the whole edge of the front. Now you can make your own bias tape, and actually in my video about making a crossback apron, I go into detail on using a bias tape maker, how to cut the fabric and everything. If you're interested in that to make it perfectly matching to your fabric, you can do that. I actually have this, which is very, very wide. It's a bias strip, but it's called hem binding. It'll work, but it's too wide. So I drew a line down the middle, and I'm just going to cut it in half. Now, if this was single fold bias tape, it would look kind of like this when you open the package with two raw edges folded towards each other. Okay? Since I sliced a very wide piece, I only have one folded in, the other is flat, which is fine because what we need to do is, even if you had two folded in, you would be needing to open one side up and pin the raw edges together. So I'm looking at the right side of the fabric here, okay, and the little flappy fold part is up, and I'm leaving about 1/2 inch of it here peeking out over the edge, so I have something to play with if I need to. Here we go. I'm going to take this all the way down along this front edge here. I think my pin is still... Move this up so you can see it well. Okay, so here's that little slash that we made, and this is the reinforced area. All right, so I'm going to fold this, or pin it up to this, the slash areas right here. Move you a little closer here. So look at the angle that you're bringing it down. All right, this is the angle, this is the straight up and down. What I want to do is get my bias tape so it is following that straight up and down fold here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm just going to put a tiny little crease with my finger there. Then to continue, I'm going to fold it back up. And you have to do this in such a way that the bottom is a single point. All right, so you're working this angle to try to make sure this fold is straight up and down, and that the bottom of that lines up to where these 2 points are meeting, if that makes any sense. Once you get that, I'm going to go ahead and stick a pin right down that little fold there to keep it from moving. And then just continue pinning the bias tape all the way up, back around, and extending it past the zipper again, at least 1/2 inch on that side. All right, so I'm looking at the back of the dress here, and with all of this just pinned in place, I'm going to zip up my zipper all the way up. And what I want to do right now is mark where these two are at the same point. So if I'm coming in here and I'm going to be stitching, let's say at about 1/4 inch, I think that's where I'm going to stitch. This is where that point is on the front, or on the overlap part, and then I'm going to write the same little mark here on the other side and bring that in. And that is because you get one chance to line up this edge. All right, so see that line, how I have it drawn straight across there, and it's the 2 separate pieces? That's because you get one chance to make sure that your top is going to line up right. And if you have one of these tapes slightly off, or you guess wrong, or your seam allowance is a little skewed, when you go to zip it up on your final one, you might have 2 different levels, and that's never really satisfying. So you don't have to do it for your whole neckline, but right here where the zipper's going to meet, I would suggest putting a line so you know exactly where those levels need to be for them to equal out. So now I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and stitch this whole thing around at about a fat 1/4 inch all the way around. Okay, so you can see this is my front notched edge. I'm actually going to need to clip this just a bit more because my stitching is actually about 1/8 of an inch more, and that'll help it turn better. So I'm just going to put a clip to there. Now I have this little triangle here, which is going to be a little bit bulky, but we'll deal with that in just a second. First thing we're going to do is make sure that everything is going to turn nicely, and it looks like a really nice V right there. So by doing that, though, we have this chunk right here. So I'm going to be trimming that off. Come back in here, and I'm going to trim that off, so that now I can come back on the inside, because I'm going to be stitching this down on the inside. I can get it to lay nice and flat like that. So actually, before I pin up that corner, the little V in the front, before I pin the V in the front, what I actually need to do is do some more understitching. And I was torn between if I should trim it before or after. And I think I'm going to trim it before. And that's so that when we turn this, it's going to curve nicer and it won't be quite as bulky. So let me go ahead and trim just a bit of this seam allowance. And again, my seam allowance is small. It's just the pinking will help it to lay flatter and to to make that curve. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now that I have my edges pinked, what I'm going to be doing is, well, pressing the interface, or pressing the bias tape up towards the seam allowance. And again, I'm going to be doing a straight stitch, just about 1/8 of an inch in, all the way around on the bias tape, making sure that I'm going over the seam allowance that's underneath here. And that's going to help it so that once that is understitched, we'll be able to just fold it over and it'll have a really nice edge up here at the top. All right, so I have my bias tape sewed on. Everything was going great. And I have a dilemma. Let me see if the camera can pick it up. I don't know if you can see in here, but there's like 3 teeth of this zipper that are completely messed up. I think that it had dry rotted or something, and when I pulled the zipper up, it just went pfft. So here's the problem. If I open the zipper beyond this point, it's not going to close again. It'll make a big bubble. So what I'm going to have to do, because I am not going to put in a brand new zipper at this point, is just basically put a stop at this point, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. And then I'll just put a couple hooks or maybe a pretty little button or something here up at the top to make it so that it's obvious that it was meant to be that way. So yeah, I'm going to actually fix this a little bit differently. I was going to start working on this top inch here so that I could show you how to make this work, because right now the way I have it is if you just fold it, well, let's see here. If you just fold it like this, it's going to cover part of your zipper, and you don't want that. And so I was going to show you the way to fix that when I realized my zipper itself was broken. But just to bring this whole thing full circle, I'm going to go ahead and pick out about 1.5 inches of stitches right here. Fix this top so it'll look nice. Bind off this zipper down here so that it won't roll off the rails, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so first this. What I did is I pulled out some stitches about 1 inch, well, right to there, about 1 inch down here, and opened it up. And what I've done is just tucked it inside here. Everything's just kind of tucked in so that the raw edges are all covered up. And then that zipper, I also just kind of folded it in here. And then what I'm going to do is come back and just re-sew this stitch line right here. And that way my zipper goes all the way to the top. Well, once I pull these clipped threads off, it'll look nice and neat from the outside, and it should line up with the other side. So that taken care of, I'll go to the next step. Now the pattern wants you to hand baste this all the way around and then come back and top stitch it from the outside. I am just stitching it down from the right side, but I'm using my little narrow foot, and this is the same foot that I use when I'm putting on my zippers. So I'm just running it with the edge of my little narrow foot right along the edge of the bias tape. Alright, so hopefully you can see here what I've got is, sorry, this was my understitching, and I didn't come all the way through the point. I came almost to it, stopped, and then started again on this side. Alright, that way this point could turn easily. So what I'm doing is I've just turned everything, and I still have this pin holding that point where I want it. And I'm going to bring it, my stitching, all the way to that point. I hit my zigzag, that's no good. Try to be really careful to take my stitching right to the corner of my point, and then lift it up and pivot everything. To come back up the other way. Alright, so just to let you know, and hopefully you won't have to do this, but I am going to go ahead and sew a snap right up here at the very top, so that when my zipper gets to the point, which is like down here, that it comes to its end, so that there's something up here to close it, but it's not really obvious. I'm just going to put a little hidden snap right here, and I think that's going to be fine. I'm working on this. I just wanted to show you how I do a snap. I put the, I guess it's called the male end on first, and then to figure out the female placement, I rub a chalk on it. So my fabric is pink, so I'm rubbing a blue chalk on the tip. Then I can just push it down to where I want it to go, and I have a mark right where I want the center of that snap to be, so that I can have good placement for my snap. So anyway, that's how I do it. Alrighty, so moving on, we are going to start dealing with the sleeves. So there's dots up at the top of the sleeve cap marking where we're gathering, and down below there's also a couple dots. So in between these dots here and these dots here, I'm going to be running 2 rows of basting stitches, and I have put my super strong thread into the bobbin of my machine because that's the thread that I use to pull when I'm gathering. But before I do that, I had to mark everything, and I made sure, and I put a letter B on my back piece so that I can tell at a glance what side is the front, what side is the back. The back has a B. So I'm going to go ahead and serge around each of these pieces and then run those 2 layers or 2 rows of the gathering stitches in those 2 places on both pieces, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now although the directions call to sew the seams together and then gather, I'm actually going to gather this long edge, not the cap, but the long edge of the sleeve, and sew that onto my band first. So what I've got is these bands. They're the same either way, so it doesn't really matter where you start. And I'm just going to pin it on. Now remember, I cut my band slightly larger. Actually, I cut it about 1 inch larger, half an inch larger on each side. So my gathers, oh my gosh, my finger's so dirty. So my gathers will probably be a little bit looser than yours would be if you do this. So I'm pinning the sides. There is a notch right here, so I'm going to match the notch on my band with the notch on the sleeves, and then just get started gathering it together. Once I have it gathered together, I will sew it straight across here at a 5/8 inch seam. Alright, so I have my cuff sewed on. Everything's gathered up here. I have not done anything at the top yet. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and sew the underarm seam here right now. So I am pressing the seam allowances of this seam down. I'm going to pin it up here and down below. Once I get this stitch sewn, once I get this sewn, then I'll come back, probably clip this inner part here to take out some bulk, and press this seam open. So I have it pressed open, and now I'm going to fold down an edge about 3/8, bring it up, and I'm going to pin it here where the other seams are up on top. So let me do it one more on this side, folding it up about 3/8, and then up to the stitching line. I should be able to pop the edges and have them just fall into place. So let me just double check, stick a pin on each side. Okay, so I have my little sleeve done, and it's ready to be set into my dress. And even though I ironed off my little letter B, I can tell which side is the back because the back always has more notches than the front. And this has one notch, and over here, this has two notches. So I know this is my back side, and this is my back side. So I'm just going to match it up here. Placing inside, matching up the centers on the underarm seams. Alright, so I have it pinned so that my center bottom of the armpit here is matched up. The notches are matched up. The side dots are matched up, and the top is matched up. So now what I need to do is pull on my gathering threads, and again, my bobbin is the thread that I want to pull. The bobbin is the better one to pull. It's easier, it's smoother, and everything like that when you're gathering. And I use a different color on my bobbin. I use a very strong white thread, and so it's easy for me to see which thread is which. So with it already pinned like this, I'm just going to go ahead and pull my bobbins and move those gathering stitches over until it is all formed up. So we're going to have a cute little gathered head on this sleeve. Alright, so once I have it so it's nice and flat, then I can take my threads, do a little figure 8 type of a secured weave on a pin here. It's nice and flat, and then I can just kind of spread them out so that they're even. And then do the same thing on the other side, and if you need to tweak it at that point, go ahead and pull a little bit more and tweak it, and then it's ready to go ahead and stitch all the way around. Now, what I would do is start stitching right over here, just above this seam. Go all the way around. At that point, reinforce it, move it in about 1/8 of an inch, and then come one more swipe to just beyond here. That way you have 2 layers of stitching at the point under the arm where you could have the most strain. So with the underarm seams and the whole arm sleeve sewn on, I'm going to come back here where I have that double layer stitching and take a little bit of the thickness out with the pinking shears, which is always a challenge over the thicker parts. So what the instructions call for a hem is just a very narrow hem at the bottom, and this is very wide and very curved, just to let you know. So we're just going to do the very simple thing that they ask for, actually, which is you fold it up about 5/8 and then tuck in the top. So we got her done, and actually it went together really quick. This was truly a one-day make kind of thing. I cut it out this morning. It's early afternoon, and I stopped for a few things in the middle of the day, so that was good. If my zipper hadn't been defective, it would have been a lot easier, but you know, these things happen, and you figure out a way to work around it. I can say that if I'm going to make this pattern again, and it's very comfortable, I might, but if I do, I'm not doing these bands. I made, whoa, cat, sorry, my cat knocked over my tripod, get away, cat. Anyway, I made these bands an inch wider than the pattern called for. I cut out a size 16 and I made the bands the size 20, so it's like half an inch wider on each side, and it still feels tight. You know, I can move, but not freely. And I was hoping to have made it wide enough that what I was hoping is that the sleeve was longer, was what it was. For some reason, I was picturing this sleeve coming down to right above elbow and not like puff sleeve. But it's okay, it's fine. But if I make it again, I'm not going to put the band on. The sleeve itself has a nice flare to it without the gathers, so I think I'll just leave it off and hem the bottom of the sleeve. Move, cat. Anyhow, it was a good little pattern. The little tucks right here under your bust area, it's interesting. It definitely accentuates the shape of the bust, but they're up so high it doesn't tuck in at the waist, which is, you know, it might be a good thing. If you're very self-conscious about your waist and everything, this actually might work out well for you. It's just, you know, be aware of going into it. The tucks in the back are set lower, so they are more like mid-back, high waist type thing. These are like lower bust, if that helps you any. But yeah, it went together easy. I think that this fabric is really good for it. This very lightweight cotton canvasy type fabric. It feels like I could just go out and mow the grass, and actually I have to finish cutting the grass in a minute. So I think I could do that in this dress, you know? Why not? Just to let you know, I cut out the hemline that's high in the middle and lower on the sides, and I used their pattern. Okay, usually I have to like raise it up several inches because I'm a lot shorter than the traditional 5'7" model, I guess, that they would use. But I just used it as is, so you can see how long it is on me. It's a fairly that if you're using that hemline, it's fairly long. So I didn't shorten it at all. That's as it is, and I am a little over 5'4", if that helps you. So anyhow, that's it. I got to go finish mowing the grass, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.